Condeed, by Voltaire. Part 3. Chapter 20. What happened at sea to Condeed and Martin? The old philosopher, whose name was Martin, embarked then with Condeed for Bordeaux. They had both seen and suffered a great deal, and if the vessel had sailed from Suriname to Japan, by the Cape of Good Hope, the subject of moral and natural evil would have enabled them to entertain one another during the whole voyage. Condeed, however, had one great advantage over Martin, in that he always hoped to see Miss Cunegonde, whereas Martin had nothing at all to hope. Besides, Condeed was possessed of money and jewels, and though he had lost 100 large red sheep, laden with the greatest treasure upon earth, though the knavery of the Dutch skipper still sat heavy upon his mind, yet when he reflected upon what he had still left, and when he mentioned the name of Cunegonde, especially towards the latter end of a repast, he inclined to Pangloss's doctrine. "But you, Mr. Martin," said he to the philosopher, "what do you think of all this? What are your ideas on moral and natural evil?" "Sir," answered Martin, "our priest accused me of being a Socinian, but the real fact is I am a Manichaean." "You jest," said Condeed, "there are no longer Manichaeans in the world." "I am one," said Martin. "I cannot help it, I know not how to think otherwise." "Surely you must be possessed by the devil," said Condeed. "He is so deeply concerned in the affairs of this world," answered Martin, "that he may very well be in me, as well as in everybody else, but I own to you that when I cast an eye on this globe, or rather on this little ball, I cannot help thinking that God has abandoned it to some malignant being. I except, always, El Dorado. I scarcely ever knew a city that did not desire the destruction of a neighboring city, nor a family that did not wish to exterminate some other family. Everywhere the weak execrate the powerful, before whom they cringe, and the powerful beat them like sheep whose wool and flesh they sell. A million regimented assassins, from one extremity of Europe to the other, get their bread by disciplined depredation and murder, for want of more honest employment. Even in those cities which seem to enjoy peace, and where the arts flourish, the inhabitants are devoured by more envy, care, and uneasiness than are experienced by a besieged town. Secret griefs are more cruel than public calamities. In a word, I have seen so much and experienced so much that I am a Manichaean." "There are, however, some things good," said Condeed. "That may be," said Martin, "but I know them not." In the middle of this dispute they heard the report of cannon. It redoubled every instant. Each took out his glass. They saw two ships in close fight about 3 miles off. The wind brought both so near to the French vessel that our travelers had the pleasure of seeing the fight at their ease. At length one let off a broadside, so low and so truly aimed, that the other sank to the bottom. Condeed and Martin could plainly perceive 100 men on the deck of the sinking vessel. They raised their hands to heaven and uttered terrible outcries, and the next moment were swallowed up by the sea. "Well," said Martin, "this is how men treat one another." "It is true," said Condeed, "there is something diabolical in this affair." While speaking, he saw he knew not what, of a shining red, swimming close to the vessel. They put out the longboat to see what it could be. It was one of his sheep. Condeed was more rejoiced at the recovery of this one sheep than he had been grieved at the loss of the 100 laden with the large diamonds of El Dorado. The French captain soon saw that the captain of the victorious vessel was a Spaniard, and that the other was a Dutch pirate, and the very same one who had robbed Condeed. The immense plunder which this villain had amassed was buried with him in the sea, and out of the whole only one sheep was saved. "You see," said Condeed to Martin, "that crime is sometimes punished. This rogue of a Dutch skipper has met with the fate he deserved." "Yes," said Martin, "but why should the passengers be doomed also to destruction?" God has punished the knave, and the devil has drowned the rest. The French and Spanish ships continued their course, and Condeed continued his conversation with Martin. They disputed 15 successive days, and on the last of those 15 days, they were as far advanced as on the first. But however they chatted, they communicated ideas, they consoled each other. Condeed caressed his sheep. "Since I have found thee again," said he, "I may likewise chance to find my Cunegonde." Chapter 21. Condeed and Martin, reasoning, draw near the coast of France. At length they descried the coast of France. "Were you ever in France, Mr. Martin?" said Condeed. "Yes," said Martin, "I have been in several provinces. In some one half of the people are fools, in others they are too cunning, in some they are weak and simple, in others they affect to be witty, in all, the principal occupation is love, the next is slander, and the third is talking nonsense. But, Mr. Martin, have you seen Paris?" "Yes, I have. All these kinds are found there. It is a chaos, a confused multitude, where everybody seeks pleasure and scarcely any one finds it, at least as it appeared to me. I made a short stay there. On my arrival I was robbed of all I had by pickpockets at the fair of Saint-Germain. I myself was taken for a robber, and was imprisoned for 8 days, after which I served as corrector of the press to gain the money necessary for my return to Holland on foot. I knew the whole scribbling rabble, the party rabble, the fanatic rabble. It is said that there are very polite people in that city, and I wish to believe it. For my part, I have no curiosity to see France," said Condeed. "You may easily imagine that after spending a month at El Dorado, I can desire to behold nothing upon earth but Miss Cunegonde. I go to await her at Venice. We shall pass through France on our way to Italy. Will you bear me company?" "With all my heart," said Martin. "It is said that Venice is fit only for its own nobility, but that strangers meet with a very good reception if they have a good deal of money. I have none of it, you have, therefore I will follow you all over the world." "But do you believe," said Condeed, "that the earth was originally a sea, as we find it asserted in that large book belonging to the captain?" "I do not believe a word of it," said Martin, "any more than I do of the many ravings which have been published lately." "But for what end, then, has this world been formed?" said Condeed. "To plague us to death," answered Martin. "Are you not greatly surprised," continued Condeed, "at the love which these 2 girls of the Orleans had for those monkeys, of which I have already told you?" "Not at all," said Martin. "I do not see that that passion was strange. I have seen so many extraordinary things that I have ceased to be surprised." "Do you believe," said Condeed, "that men have always massacred each other as they do today, that they have always been liars, cheats, traitors, ingrates, brigands, idiots, thieves, scoundrels, gluttons, drunkards, misers, envious, ambitious, bloody-minded, calumniators, debauches, fanatics, hypocrites, and fools? Do you believe," said Martin, "that hawks have always eaten pigeons when they have found them?" "Yes, without doubt," said Condeed. "Well, then," said Martin, "if hawks have always had the same character, why should you imagine that men may have changed theirs?" "Oh," said Condeed, "there is a vast deal of difference for free will." And reasoning thus they arrived at Bordeaux. Chapter 22. What happened in France to Condeed and Martin? Condeed stayed in Bordeaux no longer than was necessary for the selling of a few of the pebbles of El Dorado, and for hiring a good chaise to hold 2 passengers, for he could not travel without his philosopher Martin. He was only vexed at parting with his sheep, which he left to the Bordeaux Academy of Sciences, who set as a subject for that year's prize, to find why this sheep's wool was red, and the prize was awarded to a learned man of the north, who demonstrated by a plus b minus c divided by z, that the sheep must be red and die of the rot. Meanwhile, all the travelers whom Condeed met in the inns along his route said to him, "We go to Paris." This general eagerness at length gave him, too, a desire to see this capital, and it was not so very great a detour from the road to Venice. He entered Paris by the suburb of Saint Marceau, and fancied that he was in the dirtiest village of Westphalia. Scarcely was Condeed arrived at his inn, than he found himself attacked by a slight illness caused by fatigue. As he had a very large diamond on his finger, and the people of the inn had taken notice of a prodigiously heavy box among his baggage, there were 2 physicians to attend him, though he had never sent for them, and 2 devotees who warmed his broths. I remember, Martin said, also to have been sick at Paris in my first voyage. I was very poor, thus I had neither friends, devotees, nor doctors, and I recovered. However, what with physic and bleeding, Condeed's illness became serious. A parson of the neighborhood came with great meekness to ask for a bill for the other world payable to the bearer. Condeed would do nothing for him, but the devotees assured him it was the new fashion. He answered that he was not a man of fashion. Martin wished to throw the priest out of the window. The priest swore that they would not bury Condeed. Martin swore that he would bury the priest if he continued to be troublesome. The quarrel grew heated. Martin took him by the shoulders and roughly turned him out of doors, which occasioned great scandal and a lawsuit. Condeed got well again, and during his convalescence he had very good company to sup with him. They played high. Condeed wondered why it was that the ace never came to him, but Martin was not at all astonished. Among those who did him the honors of the town was a little abbé of Perigord, one of those busybodies who are ever alert, officious, forward, fawning, and complaisant, who watch for strangers in their passage through the capital, tell them the scandalous history of the town, and offer them pleasure at all prices. He first took Condeed and Martin to La Comédie, where they played a new tragedy. Condeed happened to be seated near some of the fashionable wits. This did not prevent his shedding tears at the well-acted scenes. One of these critics at his side said to him between the acts, "Your tears are misplaced. That is a shocking actress. The actor who plays with her is yet worse, and the play is still worse than the actors. The author does not know a word of Arabic, yet the scene is in Arabia. Moreover, he is a man that does not believe in innate ideas, and I will bring you, tomorrow, 20 pamphlets written against him." "How many dramas have you in France, sir?" said Condeed to the abbé. 5 or 6,000. "What a number," said Condeed. "How many good?" 15 or 16, replied the other. "What a number," said Martin. Condeed was very pleased with an actress who played Queen Elizabeth in a somewhat insipid tragedy sometimes acted. "That actress," said he to Martin, "pleases me much. She has a likeness to Miss Cunegonde. I should be very glad to wait upon her." The Perigordian abbé offered to introduce him. Condeed, brought up in Germany, asked what was the etiquette, and how they treated queens of England in France. "It is necessary to make distinctions," said the abbé. "In the provinces one takes them to the inn. In Paris, one respects them when they are beautiful, and throws them on the highway when they are dead." "Queens on the highway," said Condeed. "Yes, truly," said Martin, "the abbé is right. I was in Paris when Miss Minim passed, as the saying is, from this life to the other. She was refused what people call the honors of sepulture, that is to say, of rotting with all the beggars of the neighborhood in an ugly cemetery. She was interred all alone by her company at the corner of the Rue de Bourgogne, which ought to trouble her much, for she thought nobly. That was very uncivil, said Condeed. What would you have, said Martin, these people are made thus. Imagine all contradictions, all possible incompatibilities. You will find them in the government, in the law courts, in the churches, in the public shows of this droll nation. Is it true that they always laugh in Paris, said Condeed. Yes, said the abbe, but it means nothing, for they complain of everything with great fits of laughter. They even do the most detestable things while laughing. Who, said Condeed, is that great pig who spoke so ill of the piece at which I wept, and of the actors who gave me so much pleasure? He is a bad character, answered the abbe, who gains his livelihood by saying evil of all plays and of all books. He hates whatever succeeds, as the eunuchs hate those who enjoy. He is one of the serpents of literature who nourish themselves on dirt and spite. He is a folliculaire. What is a folliculaire, said Condeed. It is, said the abbe, a pamphleteer, a freeron. Thus Condeed, Martin, and the Perigordian conversed on the staircase, while watching every one go out after the performance. Although I am eager to see Cunegonde again, said Condeed, I should like to sup with Miss Claren, for she appears to me admirable. The abbe was not the man to approach Miss Claren, who saw only good company. She is engaged for this evening, he said, but I shall have the honor to take you to the house of a lady of quality, and there you will know Paris as if you had lived in it for years. Condeed, who was naturally curious, let himself be taken to this lady's house, at the end of the Faubourg Saint-Honor. The company was occupied in playing faro. A dozen melancholy punters held each in his hand a little pack of cards, a bad record of his misfortunes. Profound silence reigned. Pallor was on the faces of the punters, anxiety on that of the banker, and the hostess, sitting near the unpitying banker, noticed with lynx eyes all the doubled and other increased stakes. As each player dog's-eared his cards, she made them turn down the edges again with severe, but polite attention. She showed no vexation for fear of losing her customers. The lady insisted upon being called the Marchioness of Perrault-Lignac. Her daughter, aged 15, was among the punters, and notified with a covert glance the cheatings of the poor people who tried to repair the cruelties of fate. The Perigordian abbe, Condeed, and Martin entered. No one rose, no one saluted them, no one looked at them. All were profoundly occupied with their cards. The Baroness of Thunder-Ten-Tronckh was more polite, said Condeed. However, the abbe whispered to the Marchioness, who half rose, honored Condeed with a gracious smile, and Martin with a condescending nod. She gave a seat and a pack of cards to Condeed, who lost 50,000 francs in 2 deals, after which they supped very gaily, and every one was astonished that Condeed was not moved by his loss. The servants said among themselves, in the language of servants, "Some English lord is here this evening." The supper passed at first like most Parisian suppers in silence, followed by a noise of words which could not be distinguished, then with pleasantries of which most were insipid, with false news, with bad reasoning, a little politics, and much evil speaking. They also discussed new books. "Have you seen," said the Perigordian abbe, "the romance of Sieur Gauquat, Doctor of Divinity?" "Yes," answered one of the guests, "but I have not been able to finish it. We have a crowd of silly writings, but altogether do not approach the impertinence of Gauquat, Doctor of Divinity. I am so satiated with the great number of detestable books with which we are inundated that I am reduced to punting at faro. And the mélanges of Archdeacon Troublet, what do you say of that?" said the abbe. "Ah," said the Marchioness of Perrault-Lignac, "the wearisome mortal. How curiously he repeats to you all that the world knows. How heavily he discusses that which is not worth the trouble of lightly remarking upon. How, without wit, he appropriates the wit of others. How he spoils what he steals. How he disgusts me. But he will disgust me no longer. It is enough to have read a few of the archdeacon's pages. There was at table a wise man of taste, who supported the Marchioness. They spoke afterwards of tragedies. The lady asked why there were tragedies which were sometimes played, and which could not be read. The man of taste explained very well how a piece could have some interest, and have almost no merit. He proved in few words that it was not enough to introduce one or two of those situations which one finds in all romances, and which always seduce the spectator, but that it was necessary to be new without being odd, often sublime, and always natural, to know the human heart, and to make it speak. To be a great poet without allowing any person in the piece to appear to be a poet, to know language perfectly, to speak it with purity, with continuous harmony, and without rhythm ever taking anything from sense. Whoever, added he, does not observe all these rules can produce one or two tragedies, applauded at a theatre, but he will never be counted in the ranks of good writers. There are very few good tragedies. Some are idylls in dialogue, well written and well rhymed, others political reasonings which lull to sleep, or amplifications which repel, others demoniac dreams in barbarous style, interrupted in sequence, with long apostrophes to the gods because they do not know how to speak to men, with false maxims, with bombastic commonplaces. Condeed listened with attention to this discourse, and conceived a great idea of the speaker, and as the Marchioness had taken care to place him beside her, he leaned towards her and took the liberty of asking who was the man who had spoken so well. "He is a scholar," said the lady, "who does not play, whom the abbé sometimes brings to supper. He is perfectly at home among tragedies and books, and he has written a tragedy which was hissed, and a book of which nothing has ever been seen outside his bookseller's shop excepting the copy which he dedicated to me." "The great man," said Condeed. "He is another Pangloss." Then, turning towards him, he said, "Sir, you think doubtless that all is for the best in the moral and physical world, and that nothing could be otherwise than it is." "Aye, sir," answered the scholar, "I know nothing of all that. I find that all goes awry with me, that no one knows either what is his rank, nor what is his condition, what he does nor what he ought to do, and that except supper, which is always gay, and where there appears to be enough concord, all the rest of the time is passed in impertinent quarrels, Jansenist against Molinist, Parliament against the Church, men of letters against men of letters, courtesans against courtesans, financiers against the people, wives against husbands, relatives against relatives. It is eternal war." "I have seen the worst," Condeed replied. "But a wise man, who since has had the misfortune to be hanged, taught me that all is marvelously well. These are but the shadows on a beautiful picture." "Your hanged man mocked the world," said Martin. "The shadows are horrible blots." "They are men who make the blots," said Condeed, "and they cannot be dispensed with." "It is not their fault then," said Martin. Most of the punters, who understood nothing of this language, drank, and Martin reasoned with the scholar, and Condeed related some of his adventures to his hostess. After supper the Marchioness took Condeed into her boudoir, and made him sit upon a sofa. "Ah, well," said she to him, "you love desperately Miss Cunegonde of Thunder Ten Tronckh." "Yes, madam," answered Condeed. The Marchioness replied to him with a tender smile. "You answer me like a young man from Westphalia." A Frenchman would have said, "It is true that I have loved Miss Cunegonde, but seeing you, madam, I think I no longer love her." "Alas!" "Madam," said Condeed, "I will answer you as you wish." "Your passion for her," said the Marchioness, "commenced by picking up her handkerchief." "I wish that you would pick up my garter." "With all my heart," said Condeed. And he picked it up. "But I wish that you would put it on," said the lady. And Condeed put it on. "You see," said she, "you are a foreigner. I sometimes make my Parisian lovers languish for 15 days, but I give myself to you the first night, because one must do the honors of one's country to a young man from Westphalia." The lady, having perceived 2 enormous diamonds upon the hands of the young foreigner, praised them with such good faith that from Condeed's fingers they passed to her own. Condeed, returning with the Perigordian Abbé, felt some remorse in having been unfaithful to Miss Cunegonde. The Abbé sympathized in his trouble. He had had but a light part of the 50,000 francs lost at play, and of the value of the 2 brilliants, half given, half extorted. His design was to profit as much as he could by the advantages which the acquaintance of Condeed could procure for him. He spoke much of Cunegonde, and Condeed told him that he should ask forgiveness of that beautiful one for his infidelity when he should see her in Venice. The Abbé redoubled his politeness and attentions, and took a tender interest in all that Condeed said, in all that he did, in all that he wished to do. "And so, sir, you have a rendezvous at Venice?" "Yes, Monsieur Abbé," answered Condeed. "It is absolutely necessary that I go to meet Miss Cunegonde." And then the pleasure of talking of that which he loved induced him to relate, according to his custom, part of his adventures with the fair Westphalian. "I believe," said the Abbé, "that Miss Cunegonde has a great deal of wit, and that she writes charming letters." "I have never received any from her," said Condeed, "for being expelled from the castle on her account, I had not an opportunity for writing to her. Soon after that I heard she was dead, then I found her alive, then I lost her again, and last of all, I sent an express to her 2,500 leagues from here, and I wait for an answer." The Abbé listened attentively, and seemed to be in a brown study. He soon took his leave of the 2 foreigners after a most tender embrace. The following day Condeed received, on awaking, a letter couched in these terms: "My very dear love, for 8 days I have been ill in this town. I learn that you are here. I would fly to your arms if I could but move. I was informed of your passage at Bordeaux, where I left faithful Cacambo and the old woman, who are to follow me very soon. The governor of Buenos Aires has taken all, but there remains to me your heart. Come. Your presence will either give me life or kill me with pleasure." This charming, this unhoped-for letter transported Condeed with an inexpressible joy, and the illness of his dear Cunegonde overwhelmed him with grief. Divided between those 2 passions, he took his gold and his diamonds and hurried away, with Martin, to the hotel where Miss Cunegonde was lodged. He entered her room trembling, his heart palpitating, his voice sobbing. He wished to open the curtains of the bed, and asked for a light. "Take care what you do," said the servant maid. "The light hurts her," and immediately she drew the curtain again. "My dear Cunegonde," said Condeed, weeping, "how are you? If you cannot see me, at least speak to me." "She cannot speak," said the maid. The lady then put a plump hand out from the bed, and Condeed bathed it with his tears, and afterwards filled it with diamonds, leaving a bag of gold upon the easy chair. In the midst of these transports in came an officer, followed by the Abbé and a file of soldiers. "There," said he, "are the 2 suspected foreigners," and at the same time he ordered them to be seized and carried to prison. "Travelers are not treated thus in El Dorado," said Condeed. "I am more a Manichaean now than ever," said Martin. "But pray, sir, where are you going to carry us?" said Condeed. "To a dungeon," answered the officer. Martin, having recovered himself a little, judged that the lady who acted the part of Cunegonde was a cheat, that the Perigordian Abbé was a knave who had imposed upon the honest simplicity of Condeed, and that the officer was another knave whom they might easily silence. Condeed, advised by Martin and impatient to see the real Cunegonde, rather than expose himself before a court of justice, proposed to the officer to give him 3 small diamonds, each worth about 3,000 pistoles. "Ah, sir," said the man with the ivory baton, "had you committed all the imaginable crimes, you would be to me the most honest man in the world. 3 diamonds, each worth 3,000 pistoles. Sir, instead of carrying you to jail, I would lose my life to serve you. There are orders for arresting all foreigners, but leave it to me. I have a brother at Dieppe in Normandy. I'll conduct you thither, and if you have a diamond to give him, he'll take as much care of you as I would." "And why," said Condeed, "should all foreigners be arrested?" "It is," the Perigordian abbe then made answer, "because a poor beggar of the country of Atrocities heard some foolish things said. This induced him to commit a parricide, not such as that of 1,610 in the month of May, but such as that of 1,594 in the month of December, and such as others which have been committed in other years and other months by other poor devils who had heard nonsense spoken." The officer then explained what the abbe meant. "Ah, the monsters," cried Condeed. "What horrors among a people who dance and sing! Is there no way of getting quickly out of this country where monkeys provoke tigers? I have seen no bears in my country, but men I have beheld nowhere except in El Dorado. In the name of God, sir, conduct me to Venice, where I am to await Miss Cunegonde." "I can conduct you no further than Lower Normandy," said the officer. Immediately he ordered his irons to be struck off, acknowledged himself mistaken, sent away his men, set out with Condeed and Martin for Dieppe, and left them in the care of his brother. There was then a small Dutch ship in the harbor. The Norman, who by the virtue of 3 more diamonds had become the most subservient of men, put Condeed and his attendants on board a vessel that was just ready to set sail for Portsmouth in England. This was not the way to Venice, but Condeed thought he had made his way out of hell, and reckoned that he would soon have an opportunity for resuming his journey. Chapter 23. Condeed and Martin touched upon the coast of England and what they saw there. "Ah, Pangloss! Pangloss! Ah, Martin! Martin! Ah, my dear Cunegonde, what sort of a world is this?" said Condeed on board the Dutch ship. "Something very foolish and abominable," said Martin. "You know England. Are they as foolish there as in France?" "It is another kind of folly," said Martin. "You know that these 2 nations are at war for a few acres of snow in Canada, and that they spend over this beautiful war much more than Canada is worth. To tell you exactly, whether there are more people fit to send to a madhouse in one country than the other, is what my imperfect intelligence will not permit. I only know in general that the people we are going to see are very atrabilious." Talking thus they arrived at Portsmouth. The coast was lined with crowds of people, whose eyes were fixed on a fine man kneeling, with his eyes bandaged, on board one of the men of war in the harbor. 4 soldiers stood opposite to this man, each of them fired 3 balls at his head, with all the calmness in the world, and the whole assembly went away very well satisfied. "What is all this?" said Condeed, "and what demon is it that exercises his empire in this country?" He then asked who was that fine man who had been killed with so much ceremony. They answered, he was an admiral. "And why kill this admiral?" "It is because he did not kill a sufficient number of men himself. He gave battle to a French admiral, and it has been proved that he was not near enough to him." "But," replied Condeed, "the French admiral was as far from the English admiral." "There is no doubt of it, but in this country it is found good, from time to time, to kill one admiral to encourage the others." Condeed was so shocked and bewildered by what he saw and heard, that he would not set foot on shore, and he made a bargain with the Dutch skipper, were he even to rob him like the Suriname captain, to conduct him without delay to Venice. The skipper was ready in 2 days. They coasted France, they passed in sight of Lisbon, and Condeed trembled. They passed through the straits and entered the Mediterranean. At last they landed at Venice. "God be praised," said Condeed, embracing Martin. "It is here that I shall see again my beautiful Cunegonde. I trust Cacambo as myself. All is well, all will be well, all goes as well as possible." Chapter 24. Of Paquette and Friar Giroflée. Upon their arrival at Venice, Condeed went to search for Cacambo at every inn and coffee house, and among all the ladies of pleasure, but to no purpose. He sent every day to inquire on all the ships that came in. But there was no news of Cacambo. "What," said he to Martin, "I have had time to voyage from Suriname to Bordeaux, to go from Bordeaux to Paris, from Paris to Dieppe, from Dieppe to Portsmouth, to coast along Portugal and Spain, to cross the whole Mediterranean, to spend some months, and yet the beautiful Cunegonde has not arrived. Instead of her I have only met a Parisian wench and a Perigordian abbé. Cunegonde is dead without doubt, and there is nothing for me but to die. Alas! How much better it would have been for me to have remained in the paradise of El Dorado than to come back to this cursed Europe. You are in the right, my dear Martin, all is misery and illusion." He fell into a deep melancholy, and neither went to see the opera, nor any of the other diversions of the carnival. Nay, he was proof against the temptations of all the ladies. "You are in truth very simple," said Martin to him, "if you imagine that a mongrel valet, who has 5 or 6 millions in his pocket, will go to the other end of the world to seek your mistress and bring her to you to Venice. If he find her, he will keep her to himself. If he do not find her, he will get another. I advise you to forget your valet Cacambo and your mistress Cunegonde." Martin was not consoling. Condeed's melancholy increased, and Martin continued to prove to him that there was very little virtue or happiness upon earth, except perhaps in El Dorado, where nobody could gain admittance. While they were disputing on this important subject and waiting for Cunegonde, Condeed saw a young Thetan friar in St. Mark's Piazza, holding a girl on his arm. The Thetan looked fresh-colored, plump, and vigorous. His eyes were sparkling, his air assured, his look lofty, and his step bold. The girl was very pretty, and sang. She looked amorously at her Thetan, and from time to time pinched his fat cheeks. "At least you will allow me," said Condeed to Martin, "that these two are happy. Hitherto I have met with none but unfortunate people in the whole habitable globe, except in El Dorado, but as to this pair, I would venture to lay a wager that they are very happy." "I lay you they are not," said Martin. "We need only ask them to dine with us," said Condeed, "and you will see whether I am mistaken." Immediately he accosted them, presented his compliments, and invited them to his inn to eat some macaroni, with Lombard partridges, and caviar, and to drink some Montepulciano, Lacrimae Christi, Cyprus and Samos wine. The girl blushed, the Thetan accepted the invitation, and she followed him, casting her eyes on Condeed with confusion and surprise, and dropping a few tears. No sooner had she set foot in Condeed's apartment than she cried out, "Ah! Mr. Condeed does not know Paquette again." Condeed had not viewed her as yet with attention, his thoughts being entirely taken up with Cunegonde, but recollecting her as she spoke. "Alas," said he, "my poor child, it is you who reduced Dr. Pangloss to the beautiful condition in which I saw him." "Alas! It was I, sir, indeed," answered Paquette. "I see that you have heard all. I have been informed of the frightful disasters that befell the family of my Lady Baroness, and the fair Cunegonde. I swear to you that my fate has been scarcely less sad. I was very innocent when you knew me. A Grey Friar, who was my confessor, easily seduced me. The consequences were terrible. I was obliged to quit the castle some time after the Baron had sent you away with kicks on the backside. If a famous surgeon had not taken compassion on me, I should have died. For some time I was this surgeon's mistress, merely out of gratitude. His wife, who was mad with jealousy, beat me every day unmercifully. She was a fury. The surgeon was one of the ugliest of men, and I the most wretched of women, to be continually beaten for a man I did not love. You know, sir, what a dangerous thing it is for an ill-natured woman to be married to a doctor. Incensed at the behavior of his wife, he one day gave her so effectual a remedy to cure her of a slight cold, that she died 2 hours after, in most horrid convulsions. The wife's relations prosecuted the husband, he took flight, and I was thrown into jail. My innocence would not have saved me if I had not been good-looking. The judge set me free, on condition that he succeeded the surgeon. I was soon supplanted by a rival, turned out of doors quite destitute, and obliged to continue this abominable trade, which appears so pleasant to you men, while to us women it is the utmost abyss of misery. I have come to exercise the profession at Venice. Ah! Sir, if you could only imagine what it is to be obliged to caress indifferently an old merchant, a lawyer, a monk, a gondolier, an abbé, to be exposed to abuse and insults, to be often reduced to borrowing a petticoat, only to go and have it raised by a disagreeable man, to be robbed by one of what one has earned from another, to be subject to the extortions of the officers of justice, and to have in prospect only a frightful old age, a hospital, and a dunghill, you would conclude that I am one of the most unhappy creatures in the world. Paquette thus opened her heart to honest Condeed, in the presence of Martin, who said to his friend, "You see that already I have won half the wager." Friar Giroflée stayed in the dining room, and drank a glass or two of wine while he was waiting for dinner. "But," said Condeed to Paquette, "you looked so gay and content when I met you, you sang and you behaved so lovingly to the Thetan, that you seem to me as happy as you pretend to be now the reverse." "Ah, sir," answered Paquette, "this is one of the miseries of the trade. Yesterday I was robbed and beaten by an officer, yet today I must put on good humor to please a friar." Condeed wanted no more convincing. He owned that Martin was in the right. They sat down to table with Paquette and the Thetan. The repast was entertaining, and towards the end they conversed with all confidence. "Father," said Condeed to the friar, "you appear to me to enjoy a state that all the world might envy. The flower of health shines in your face, your expression makes plain your happiness. You have a very pretty girl for your recreation, and you seem well satisfied with your state as a Thetan." "My faith, sir," said Friar Giroflée, "I wish that all the Theatins were at the bottom of the sea. I have been tempted 100 times to set fire to the convent, and go and become a Turk. My parents forced me at the age of 15 to put on this detestable habit, to increase the fortune of a cursed elder brother, whom God confound. Jealousy, discord, and fury dwell in the convent. It is true I have preached a few bad sermons that have brought me in a little money, of which the prior stole half, while the rest serves to maintain my girls, but when I return at night to the monastery, I am ready to dash my head against the walls of the dormitory, and all my fellows are in the same case." Martin turned towards Condeed with his usual coolness. "Well," said he, "have I not won the whole wager?" Condeed gave 2,000 piastres to Paquette, and 1,000 to Friar Giroflée. "I'll answer for it," said he, "that with this they will be happy." "I do not believe it at all," said Martin. "You will, perhaps, with these piastres only render them the more unhappy." "Let that be as it may," said Condeed, "but one thing consoles me. I see that we often meet with those whom we expected never to see more, so that perhaps, as I have found my red sheep in Paquette, it may well be that I shall also find Cunegonde." "I wish," said Martin, "she may one day make you very happy, but I doubt it very much." "You are very hard of belief," said Condeed. "I have lived," said Martin. "You see those gondoliers," said Condeed, "are they not perpetually singing?" "You do not see them," said Martin, "at home with their wives and brats. The Doge has his troubles, the gondoliers have theirs." It is true that, all things considered, the life of a gondolier is preferable to that of a Doge, but I believe the difference to be so trifling that it is not worth the trouble of examining. "People talk," said Condeed, "of the Senator Pococurante, who lives in that fine palace on the Brenta, where he entertains foreigners in the politest manner. They pretend that this man has never felt any uneasiness." "I should be glad to see such a rarity," said Martin. Condeed immediately sent to ask the Lord Pococurante permission to wait upon him the next day. Chapter 25. The visit to Lord Pococurante, a noble Venetian. Condeed and Martin went in a gondola on the Brenta, and arrived at the palace of the noble Signor Pococurante. The gardens, laid out with taste, were adorned with fine marble statues. The palace was beautifully built. The master of the house was a man of 60, and very rich. He received the two travelers with polite indifference, which put Condeed a little out of countenance, but was not at all disagreeable to Martin. First, two pretty girls, very neatly dressed, served them with chocolate, which was frothed exceedingly well. Condeed could not refrain from commending their beauty, grace, and address. "They are good enough creatures," said the senator. "I make them lie with me sometimes, for I am very tired of the ladies of the town, of their coquetries, of their jealousies, of their quarrels, of their humors, of their pettinesses, of their prides, of their follies, and of the sonnets which one must make or have made for them. But after all, these two girls begin to weary me." After breakfast, Condeed, walking into a long gallery, was surprised by the beautiful pictures. He asked, by what master were the two first? "They are by Raphael," said the senator. "I bought them at a great price, out of vanity, some years ago. They are said to be the finest things in Italy, but they do not please me at all. The colors are too dark, the figures are not sufficiently rounded, nor in good relief, the draperies in no way resemble stuffs. In a word, whatever may be said, I do not find there a true imitation of nature. I only care for a picture when I think I see nature itself, and there are none of this sort. I have a great many pictures, but I prize them very little." While they were waiting for dinner, Pococurante ordered a concert. Condeed found the music delicious. "This noise," said the senator, "may amuse one for half an hour, but if it were to last longer it would grow tiresome to everybody, though they durst not own it. Music, today, is only the art of executing difficult things, and that which is only difficult cannot please long. Perhaps I should be fonder of the opera, if they had not found the secret of making of it a monster which shocks me. Let who will go to see bad tragedies set to music, where the scenes are contrived for no other end than to introduce 2 or 3 songs ridiculously out of place, to show off an actress's voice. Let who will, or who can, die away with pleasure at the sight of an eunuch quavering the role of Caesar, or of Cato, and strutting awkwardly upon the stage. For my part, I have long since renounced those paltry entertainments which constitute the glory of modern Italy, and are purchased so dearly by sovereigns." Condeed disputed the point a little, but with discretion. Martin was entirely of the senator's opinion. They sat down to table, and after an excellent dinner they went into the library. Condeed, seeing a Homer magnificently bound, commended the virtuoso on his good taste. "There," said he, "is a book that was once the delight of the great Pangloss, the best philosopher in Germany." "It is not mine," answered Pococurante coolly. "They used at one time to make me believe that I took a pleasure in reading him. But that continual repetition of battles, so extremely like one another, those gods that are always active without doing anything decisive, that Helen who is the cause of the war, and who yet scarcely appears in the peace, that Troy, so long besieged without being taken, all these together caused me great weariness. I have sometimes asked learned men whether they were not as weary as I of that work. Those who were sincere have owned to me that the poem made them fall asleep, yet it was necessary to have it in their library as a monument of antiquity, or like those rusty metals which are no longer of use in commerce." "But your Excellency does not think thus of Virgil," said Condeed. "I grant," said the senator, "that the second, fourth, and sixth books of his Aeneid are excellent, but as for his pious Aeneas, his strong Cloanthus, his friend Achates, his little Ascanius, his silly King Latinus, his bourgeois Amida, his insipid Lavinia, I think there can be nothing more flat and disagreeable. I prefer Tasso a good deal, or even the soporific tales of Ariosto." "May I presume to ask you, sir," said Condeed, "whether you do not receive a great deal of pleasure from reading Horace?" "There are maxims in this writer," answered Pococurante, "from which a man of the world may reap great benefit, and being written in energetic verse they are more easily impressed upon the memory. But I care little for his journey to Brundusium, and his account of a bad dinner, or of his low quarrel between one Rupilius whose words he says were full of poisonous filth, and another whose language was imbued with vinegar. I have read with much distaste his indelicate verses against old women and witches, nor do I see any merit in telling his friend Maecenas that if he will but rank him in the choir of lyric poets, his lofty head shall touch the stars. Fools admire everything in an author of reputation. For my part, I read only to please myself. I like only that which serves my purpose." Condeed, having been educated never to judge for himself, was much surprised at what he heard. Martin found there was a good deal of reason in Pococurante's remarks. "Oh, here is Cicero," said Condeed. "Here is the great man whom I fancy you are never tired of reading." "I never read him," replied the Venetian. "What is it to me whether he pleads for Rubirius or Cloantius? I try causes enough myself. His philosophical works seem to me better, but when I found that he doubted of everything, I concluded that I knew as much as he, and that I had no need of a guide to learn ignorance." "H.A. Here are 80 volumes of the Academy of Sciences," cried Martin. "Perhaps there is something valuable in this collection." "There might be," said Pococurante, "if only one of those rakers of rubbish had shown how to make pins, but in all these volumes there is nothing but chimerical systems, and not a single useful thing." "And what dramatic works I see here," said Condeed, "in Italian, Spanish, and French." "Yes," replied the senator, "there are 3,000, and not 36 of them good for anything. As to those collections of sermons, which altogether are not worth a single page of Seneca, and those huge volumes of theology, you may well imagine that neither I nor any one else ever opens them." Martin saw some shelves filled with English books. "I have a notion," said he, "that a republican must be greatly pleased with most of these books, which are written with a spirit of freedom." "Yes," answered Pococurante, "it is noble to write as one thinks. This is the privilege of humanity. In all our Italy we write only what we do not think. Those who inhabit the country of the Caesars and the Antoninuses dare not acquire a single idea without the permission of a Dominican friar. I should be pleased with the liberty which inspires the English genius if passion and party spirit did not corrupt all that is estimable in this precious liberty. Condeed, observing a Milton, asked whether he did not look upon this author as a great man. Who, said Pococurante, that barbarian, who writes a long commentary in 10 books of harsh verse on the first chapter of Genesis, that coarse imitator of the Greeks, who disfigures the creation, and who, while Moses represents the eternal producing the world by a word, makes the Messiah take a great pair of compasses from the armory of heaven to circumscribe his work? How can I have any esteem for a writer who has spoiled Tasso's hell, and the devil, who transforms Lucifer sometimes into a toad and other times into a pygmy, who makes him repeat the same things 100 times, who makes him dispute on theology, who by a serious imitation of Ariosto's comic invention of firearms, represents the devil's cannonading in heaven? Neither I nor any man in Italy could take pleasure in those melancholy extravagances, and the marriage of sin and death, and the snakes brought forth by sin, are enough to turn the stomach of any one with the least taste, and his long description of a pest house is good only for a grave digger. This obscure, whimsical, and disagreeable poem was despised upon its first publication, and I only treat it now as it was treated in its own country by contemporaries. For the matter of that, I say what I think, and I care very little whether others think as I do. Condeed was grieved at this speech, for he had a respect for Homer, and was fond of Milton. Alas, said he softly to Martin, I am afraid that this man holds our German poets in very great contempt. There would not be much harm in that, said Martin. Oh, what a superior man, said Condeed below his breath. What a great genius is this Pococurante. Nothing can please him. After their survey of the library, they went down into the garden, where Condeed praised its several beauties. I know of nothing in so bad a taste, said the master. All you see here is merely trifling. After tomorrow I will have it planted with a nobler design. Well, said Condeed to Martin when they had taken their leave, you will agree that this is the happiest of mortals, for he is above everything he possesses. But do you not see, answered Martin, that he is disgusted with all he possesses? Plato observed a long while ago that those stomachs are not the best that reject all sorts of food. But is there not a pleasure, said Condeed, in criticizing everything, in pointing out faults where others see nothing but beauties? That is to say, replied Martin, that there is some pleasure in having no pleasure. Well, well, said Condeed, I find that I shall be the only happy man when I am blessed with the sight of my dear Cunegonde. It is always well to hope, said Martin. However, the days and the weeks passed. Cacambo did not come, and Condeed was so overwhelmed with grief that he did not even reflect that Paquette and Friar Giroflée did not return to thank him. Chapter 26. Of a supper which Condeed and Martin took with 6 strangers, and who they were. One evening that Condeed and Martin were going to sit down to supper with some foreigners who lodged in the same inn, a man whose complexion was as black as soot came behind Condeed, and taking him by the arm, said, Get yourself ready to go along with us, do not fail. Upon this he turned round and saw Cacambo. Nothing but the sight of Cunegonde could have astonished and delighted him more. He was on the point of going mad with joy. He embraced his dear friend. Cunegonde is here, without doubt. Where is she? Take me to her that I may die of joy in her company. Cunegonde is not here, said Cacambo. She is at Constantinople. Oh heavens! At Constantinople. But were she in China, I would fly thither. Let us be off. We shall set out after supper, replied Cacambo. I can tell you nothing more. I am a slave, my master awaits me. I must serve him at table, speak not a word, eat, and then get ready." Condeed, distracted between joy and grief, delighted at seeing his faithful agent again, astonished at finding him a slave, filled with the fresh hope of recovering his mistress, his heart palpitating, his understanding confused, sat down to table with Martin, who saw all these scenes quite unconcerned, and with 6 strangers who had come to spend the carnival at Venice. Cacambo waited at table upon one of the strangers. Towards the end of the entertainment he drew near his master, and whispered in his ear, "Sire, your majesty may start when you please, the vessel is ready." On saying these words he went out. The company in great surprise looked at one another without speaking a word, when another domestic approached his master and said to him, "Sire, your majesty's chaise is at Padua, and the boat is ready." The master gave a nod and the servant went away. The company all stared at one another again, and their surprise redoubled. A third valet came up to a third stranger, saying, "Sire, believe me, your majesty ought not to stay here any longer. I am going to get everything ready." And immediately he disappeared. Condeed and Martin did not doubt that this was a masquerade of the carnival. Then a fourth domestic said to a fourth master, "Your majesty may depart when you please." Saying this he went away like the rest. The fifth valet said the same thing to the fifth master. But the sixth valet spoke differently to the sixth stranger, who sat near Condeed. He said to him, "Faith, sire, they will no longer give credit to your majesty nor to me, and we may perhaps both of us be put in jail this very night. Therefore I will take care of myself. Adieu." The servants being all gone, the 6 strangers, with Condeed and Martin, remained in a profound silence. At length Condeed broke it. "Gentlemen," said he, "this is a very good joke indeed, but why should you all be kings? For me I own that neither Martin nor I is a king." Cacambo's master then gravely answered in Italian, "I am not at all joking. My name is Achmet III. I was Grand Sultan many years. I dethroned my brother, my nephew dethroned me, my viziers were beheaded, and I am condemned to end my days in the old seraglio. My nephew, the great Sultan Mahmud, permits me to travel sometimes for my health, and I am come to spend the carnival at Venice." A young man who sat next to Achmet spoke then as follows, "My name is Ivan. I was once emperor of all the Russias, but was dethroned in my cradle. My parents were confined in prison, and I was educated there, yet I am sometimes allowed to travel in company with persons who act as guards, and I am come to spend the carnival at Venice." The third said, "I am Charles Edward, King of England. My father has resigned all his legal rights to me. I have fought in defense of them, and above 800 of my adherents have been hanged, drawn, and quartered. I have been confined in prison. I am going to Rome, to pay a visit to the king, my father, who was dethroned as well as myself and my grandfather, and I am come to spend the carnival at Venice." The fourth spoke thus in his turn, "I am the King of Poland. The fortune of war has stripped me of my hereditary dominions. My father underwent the same vicissitudes. I resign myself to Providence in the same manner as Sultan Achmet, the Emperor Ivan, and King Charles Edward, whom God long preserve, and I am come to the carnival at Venice." The fifth said, "I am King of Poland also. I have been twice dethroned, but Providence has given me another country, where I have done more good than all the Sarmatian kings were ever capable of doing on the banks of the Vistula. I resign myself likewise to Providence, and am come to pass the carnival at Venice." It was now the sixth monarch's turn to speak. "Gentlemen," said he, "I am not so great a prince as any of you, however, I am a king. I am Theodore, elected King of Corsica. I had the title of Majesty, and now I am scarcely treated as a gentleman. I have coined money, and now am not worth a farthing. I have had 2 secretaries of state, and now I have scarce a valet. I have seen myself on a throne, and I have seen myself upon straw in a common jail in London. I am afraid that I shall meet with the same treatment here, though, like your Majesties, I am come to see the carnival at Venice." The other 5 kings listened to this speech with generous compassion. Each of them gave 20 sequins to King Theodore to buy him clothes and linen, and Condeed made him a present of a diamond worth 2,000 sequins. "Who can this private person be," said the 5 kings to one another, "who is able to give, and really has given, 100 times as much as any of us?" Just as they rose from table, in came 4 serene highnesses, who had also been stripped of their territories by the fortune of war, and were come to spend the carnival at Venice. But Condeed paid no regard to these newcomers. His thoughts were entirely employed on his voyage to Constantinople, in search of his beloved Cunegond. Chapter 27. Condeed's Voyage to Constantinople. The faithful Cacambo had already prevailed upon the Turkish skipper, who was to conduct the Sultan Achmet to Constantinople, to receive Condeed and Martin on his ship. They both embarked after having made their obeisance to His Miserable Highness. "You see," said Condeed to Martin on the way, "we supped with 6 dethroned kings, and of those 6 there was one to whom I gave charity. Perhaps there are many other princes yet more unfortunate. For my part, I have only lost 100 sheep, and now I am flying into Cunegond's arms. My dear Martin, yet once more Pangloss was right, all is for the best." "I wish it," answered Martin. "But," said Condeed, "it was a very strange adventure we met with at Venice. It has never before been seen or heard that 6 dethroned kings have supped together at a public inn." "It is not more extraordinary," said Martin, "than most of the things that have happened to us. It is a very common thing for kings to be dethroned, and as for the honor we have had of supping in their company, it is a trifle not worth our attention." No sooner had Condeed got on board the vessel than he flew to his old valet and friend Cacambo, and tenderly embraced him. "Well," said he, "what news of Cunegond? Is she still a prodigy of beauty? Does she love me still? How is she? Thou hast doubtless bought her a palace at Constantinople." "My dear master," answered Cacambo, "Cunegond washes dishes on the banks of the Propontis, in the service of a prince, who has very few dishes to wash. She is a slave in the family of an ancient sovereign named Ragotsky, to whom the Grand Turk allows 3 crowns a day in his exile. But what is worse still is, that she has lost her beauty, and has become horribly ugly." "Well, handsome or ugly," replied Condeed, "I am a man of honor, and it is my duty to love her still. But how came she to be reduced to so abject a state with the 5 or 6 millions that you took to her?" "Ah," said Cacambo, "was I not to give 2 millions to Señor Don Fernando de Ibarra? Why Figueroa? Why Mascarenes? Why Lamprudas? Why Souza, governor of Buenos Aires, for permitting Miss Cunegond to come away? And did not a corsair bravely rob us of all the rest? Did not this corsair carry us to Cape Matapan, to Milo, to Nicoria, to Samos, to Petra, to the Dardanelles, to Marmora, to Scutari? Cunegond and the old woman serve the prince I now mention to you, and I am slave to the dethroned sultan." "What a series of shocking calamities," cried Condeed. "But after all, I have some diamonds left, and I may easily pay Cunegond's ransom. Yet it is a pity that she is grown so ugly." Then, turning towards Martin, "Who do you think," said he, "is most to be pitied, the Sultan Achmet, the Emperor Ivan, King Charles Edward, or I?" "How should I know?" answered Martin. I must see into your hearts to be able to tell. Ah, said Condeed, if Pangloss were here he could tell. I know not, said Martin, in what sort of scales your Pangloss would weigh the misfortunes of mankind and set a just estimate on their sorrows. All that I can presume to say is, that there are millions of people upon earth who have 100 times more to complain of than King Charles Edward, the Emperor Ivan, or the Sultan Achmet. That may well be, said Condeed. In a few days they reached the Bosphorus, and Condeed began by paying a very high ransom for Cacambo. Then, without losing time, he and his companions went on board a galley, in order to search on the banks of the Propontis for his Cunegonde, however ugly she might have become. Among the crew there were 2 slaves who rowed very badly, and to whose bare shoulders the Levantine captain would now and then apply blows from a bull's pizzle. Condeed, from a natural impulse, looked at these 2 slaves more attentively than at the other oarsmen, and approached them with pity. Their features, though greatly disfigured, had a slight resemblance to those of Pangloss, and the unhappy Jesuit and Westphalian baron, brother to Miss Cunegonde. This moved and saddened him. He looked at them still more attentively. Indeed, said he to Cacambo, if I had not seen Master Pangloss hanged, and if I had not had the misfortune to kill the baron, I should think it was they that were rowing. At the names of the baron and of Pangloss, the 2 galley slaves uttered a loud cry, held fast by the seat, and let drop their oars. The captain ran up to them and redoubled his blows with the bull's pizzle. Stop! Stop! Sir, cried Condeed. I will give you what money you please. What? It is Condeed, said one of the slaves. What? It is Condeed, said the other. Do I dream? Cried Condeed. Am I awake? Or am I on board a galley? Is this the baron whom I killed? Is this Master Pangloss whom I saw hanged? It is we. It is we, answered they. Well, is this the great philosopher? Said Martin. Ah, Captain, said Condeed, what ransom will you take for Monsieur de Thunder Tentronck, one of the first barons of the empire, and for Monsieur Pangloss, the profoundest metaphysician in Germany? Dog of a Christian, answered the Levantine captain, since these 2 dogs of Christian slaves are barons and metaphysicians, which I doubt not are high dignities in their country, you shall give me 50,000 sequins. You shall have them, sir. Carry me back at once to Constantinople, and you shall receive the money directly. But no, carry me first to Miss Cunegonde. Upon the first proposal made by Condeed, however, the Levantine captain had already tacked about, and made the crew ply their oars quicker than a bird cleaves the air. Condeed embraced the baron and Pangloss 100 times. And how happened it, my dear baron, that I did not kill you? And, my dear Pangloss, how came you to life again after being hanged? And why are you both in a Turkish galley? And it is true that my dear sister is in this country, said the baron. Yes, answered Cacambo. Then I behold, once more, my dear Condeed, cried Pangloss. Condeed presented Martin and Cacambo to them, they embraced each other, and all spoke at once. The galley flew, they were already in the port. Instantly Condeed sent for a Jew, to whom he sold for 50,000 sequins a diamond worth 100,000, though the fellow swore to him by Abraham that he could give him no more. He immediately paid the ransom for the baron and Pangloss. The latter threw himself at the feet of his deliverer, and bathed them with his tears. The former thanked him with a nod, and promised to return him the money on the first opportunity. But is it indeed possible that my sister can be in Turkey? Said he. Nothing is more possible, said Cacambo, since she scours the dishes in the service of a Transylvanian prince. Condeed sent directly for 2 Jews and sold them some more diamonds, and then they all set out together in another galley to deliver Cunegond from slavery. Chapter 28. What happened to Condeed, Cunegond, Pangloss, Martin, etc.? I ask your pardon once more, said Condeed to the Baron, your pardon, Reverend Father, for having run you through the body. Say no more about it, answered the Baron. I was a little too hasty, I own, but since you wish to know by what fatality I came to be a galley slave, I will inform you. After I had been cured by the surgeon of the college of the wound you gave me, I was attacked and carried off by a party of Spanish troops, who confined me in prison at Buenos Aires at the very time my sister was setting out thence. I asked leave to return to Rome to the general of my order. I was appointed chaplain to the French ambassador at Constantinople. I had not been 8 days in this employment when one evening I met with a young Icoglin, who was a very handsome fellow. The weather was warm. The young man wanted to bathe, and I took this opportunity of bathing also. I did not know that it was a capital crime for a Christian to be found naked with a young Mussulman. A Qadi ordered me 100 blows on the solace of the feet, and condemned me to the galleys. I do not think there ever was a greater act of injustice. But I should be glad to know how my sister came to be scullion to a Transylvanian prince, who has taken shelter among the Turks. But you, my dear Pangloss, said Condeed, how can it be that I behold you again? It is true, said Pangloss, that you saw me hanged. I should have been burnt, but you may remember it rained exceedingly hard when they were going to roast me. The storm was so violent that they despaired of lighting the fire, so I was hanged because they could do no better. A surgeon purchased my body, carried me home, and dissected me. He began with making a crucial incision on me from the navel to the clavicula. One could not have been worse hanged than I was. The executioner of the Holy Inquisition was a subdeacon, and knew how to burn people marvelously well, but he was not accustomed to hanging. The cord was wet and did not slip properly, and besides it was badly tied. In short, I still drew my breath, when the crucial incision made me give such a frightful scream that my surgeon fell flat upon his back, and imagining that he had been dissecting the devil he ran away, dying with fear, and fell down the staircase in his flight. His wife, hearing the noise, flew from the next room. She saw me stretched out upon the table with my crucial incision. She was seized with yet greater fear than her husband, fled, and tumbled over him. When they came to themselves a little, I heard the wife say to her husband, "My dear, how could you take it into your head to dissect a heretic? Do you not know that these people always have the devil in their bodies? I will go and fetch a priest this minute to exorcise him." At this proposal I shuddered, and mustering up what little courage I had still remaining, I cried out aloud, "Have mercy on me." At length the Portuguese barber plucked up his spirits. He sewed up my wounds, his wife even nursed me. I was upon my legs at the end of 15 days. The barber found me a place as lackey to a knight of Malta who was going to Venice, but finding that my master had no money to pay me my wages, I entered the service of a Venetian merchant, and went with him to Constantinople. One day I took it into my head to step into a mosque, where I saw an old imam and a very pretty young devotee, who was saying her paternosters. Her bosom was uncovered, and between her breasts she had a beautiful bouquet of tulips, roses, anemones, ranunculus, hyacinths, and auriculas. She dropped her bouquet. I picked it up, and presented it to her with a profound reverence. I was so long in delivering it that the imam began to get angry, and seeing that I was a Christian he called out for help. They carried me before the Qadi, who ordered me 100 lashes on the solace of the feet, and sent me to the galleys. I was chained to the very same galley and the same bench as the young baron. On board this galley there were 4 young men from Marseilles, 5 Neapolitan priests, and 2 monks from Corfu, who told us similar adventures happened daily. The baron maintained that he had suffered greater injustice than I, and I insisted that it was far more innocent to take up a bouquet and place it again on a woman's bosom than to be found stark naked with an ichoglan. We were continually disputing, and received 20 lashes with a bull's pizzle when the concatenation of universal events brought you to our galley, and you were good enough to ransom us. Well, my dear Pangloss, said Condeed to him, when you had been hanged, dissected, whipped, and were tugging at the oar, did you always think that everything happens for the best? I am still of my first opinion, answered Pangloss, for I am a philosopher and I cannot retract, especially as Leibniz could never be wrong, and besides, the pre-established harmony is the finest thing in the world, and so is his plenum and materia subtilis. Chapter 29. How Condeed found Cunegonde and the old woman again. While Condeed, the Baron, Pangloss, Martin, and Cacambo were relating their several adventures, were reasoning on the contingent or non-contingent events of the universe, disputing on effects and causes, on moral and physical evil, on liberty and necessity, and on the consolations a slave may feel even on a Turkish galley, they arrived at the house of the Transylvanian prince on the banks of the Propontis. The first objects which met their sight were Cunegonde and the old woman hanging towels out to dry. The baron paled at this sight. The tender, loving Condeed, seeing his beautiful Cunegonde embrowned, with bloodshot eyes, withered neck, wrinkled cheeks, and rough, red arms, recoiled 3 paces, seized with horror, and then advanced out of good manners. She embraced Condeed and her brother, they embraced the old woman, and Condeed ransomed them both. There was a small farm in the neighborhood which the old woman proposed to Condeed to make a shift with till the company could be provided for in a better manner. Cunegonde did not know she had grown ugly, for nobody had told her of it, and she reminded Condeed of his promise in so positive a tone that the good man durst not refuse her. He therefore intimated to the baron that he intended marrying his sister. I will not suffer, said the baron, such meanness on her part, and such insolence on yours. I will never be reproached with this scandalous thing. My sister's children would never be able to enter the church in Germany. No, my sister shall only marry a baron of the empire. Cunegonde flung herself at his feet, and bathed them with her tears, still he was inflexible. Thou foolish fellow, said Condeed, I have delivered thee out of the galleys, I have paid thy ransom, and thy sister's also. She was a scullion, and is very ugly, yet I am so condescending as to marry her, and dost thou pretend to oppose the match? I should kill thee again, were I only to consult my anger. Thou mayest kill me again, said the baron, but thou shalt not marry my sister, at least whilst I am living. Chapter 30. The conclusion. At the bottom of his heart Condeed had no wish to marry Cunegonde. But the extreme impertinence of the baron determined him to conclude the match, and Cunegonde pressed him so strongly that he could not go from his word. He consulted Pangloss, Martin, and the faithful Cacambo. Pangloss drew up an excellent memorial, wherein he proved that the baron had no right over his sister, and that according to all the laws of the empire, she might marry Condeed with her left hand. Martin was for throwing the baron into the sea. Cacambo decided that it would be better to deliver him up again to the captain of the galley, after which they thought to send him back to the general father of the order at Rome by the first ship. This advice was well received, the old woman approved it, they said not a word to his sister, the thing was executed for a little money, and they had the double pleasure of entrapping a Jesuit, and punishing the pride of a German baron. It is natural to imagine that after so many disasters Condeed married, and living with the philosopher Pangloss, the philosopher Martin, the prudent Cacambo, and the old woman, having besides brought so many diamonds from the country of the ancient Incas, must have led a very happy life. But he was so much imposed upon by the Jews that he had nothing left except his small farm. His wife became uglier every day, more peevish and unsupportable. The old woman was infirm and even more fretful than Cunigond. Cacambo, who worked in the garden and took vegetables for sale to Constantinople, was fatigued with hard work and cursed his destiny. Pangloss was in despair at not shining in some German university. For Martin, he was firmly persuaded that he would be as badly off elsewhere, and therefore bore things patiently. Condeed, Martin, and Pangloss sometimes disputed about morals and metaphysics. They often saw passing under the windows of their farm boats full of effendis, pashas, and cadis, who were going into banishment to Lemnos, Mytilene, or Erzurum. And they saw other cadis, pashas, and effendis coming to supply the place of the exiles, and afterwards exiled in their turn. They saw heads decently impaled for presentation to the Sublime Porte. Such spectacles as these increased the number of their dissertations, and when they did not dispute, time hung so heavily upon their hands, that one day the old woman ventured to say to them, "I want to know which is worse, to be ravished 100 times by Negro pirates, to have a buttock cut off, to run the gauntlet among the Bulgarians, to be whipped and hanged at an auto da fe, to be dissected, to row in the galleys, in short, to go through all the miseries we have undergone, or to stay here and have nothing to do?" "It is a great question," said Condeed. This discourse gave rise to new reflections, and Martin especially concluded that man was born to live either in a state of distracting inquietude or of lethargic disgust. Condeed did not quite agree to that, but he affirmed nothing. Pangloss owned that he had always suffered horribly, but as he had once asserted that everything went wonderfully well, he asserted it still, though he no longer believed it. What helped to confirm Martin in his detestable principles, to stagger Condeed more than ever, and to puzzle Pangloss, was that one day they saw Paquette and Friar Giroflée land at the farm in extreme misery. They had soon squandered their 3,000 piastres, parted, were reconciled, quarreled again, were thrown into jail, had escaped, and Friar Giroflée had at length become Turk. Paquette continued her trade wherever she went, but made nothing of it. "I foresaw," said Martin to Condeed, "that your presence would soon be dissipated, and only make them the more miserable. You have rolled in millions of money, you and Cacambo, and yet you are not happier than Friar Giroflée and Paquette." "Ha," said Pangloss to Paquette, "Providence has then brought you amongst us again, my poor child. Do you know that you cost me the tip of my nose, an eye, and an ear, as you may see? What a world is this!" And now this new adventure set them philosophizing more than ever. In the neighborhood there lived a very famous dervish, who was esteemed the best philosopher in all Turkey, and they went to consult him. Pangloss was the speaker. "Master," said he, "we come to beg you to tell why so strange an animal as man was made." "With what meddlest thou?" said the dervish, "is it thy business?" "But, reverend father," said Condeed, "there is horrible evil in this world." "What signifies it," said the dervish, "whether there be evil or good? When His Highness sends a ship to Egypt, does he trouble his head whether the mice on board are at their ease or not?" "What, then, must we do?" said Pangloss. "Hold your tongue," answered the dervish. "I was in hopes," said Pangloss, "that I should reason with you a little about causes and effects, about the best of possible worlds, the origin of evil, the nature of the soul, and the pre-established harmony." At these words, the dervish shut the door in their faces. During this conversation, the news was spread that 2 viziers and the mufti had been strangled at Constantinople, and that several of their friends had been impaled. This catastrophe made a great noise for some hours. Pangloss, Condeed, and Martin, returning to the little farm, saw a good old man taking the fresh air at his door under an orange bower. Pangloss, who was as inquisitive as he was argumentative, asked the old man what was the name of the strangled mufti. "I do not know," answered the worthy man, "and I have not known the name of any mufti, nor of any vizier. I am entirely ignorant of the event you mention. I presume in general that they who meddle with the administration of public affairs die sometimes miserably, and that they deserve it, but I never trouble my head about what is transacting at Constantinople. I content myself with sending there for sale the fruits of the garden which I cultivate." Having said these words, he invited the strangers into his house. His 2 sons and 2 daughters presented them with several sorts of sherbet, which they made themselves, with kaimak enriched with the candied peel of citrons, with oranges, lemons, pineapples, pistachio nuts, and mocha coffee unadulterated with the bad coffee of Batavia or the American islands. After which the 2 daughters of the honest Mussulman perfumed the strangers' beards. "You must have a vast and magnificent estate," said Condeed to the Turk. "I have only 20 acres," replied the old man. "I and my children cultivate them. Our labor preserves us from 3 great evils: weariness, vice, and want." Condeed, on his way home, made profound reflections on the old man's conversation. "This honest Turk," said he to Pangloss and Martin, "seems to be in a situation far preferable to that of the 6 kings with whom we had the honor of supping." "Grandeur," said Pangloss, "is extremely dangerous according to the testimony of philosophers. For, in short, Eglon, king of Moab, was assassinated by Ehud, Absalom was hung by his hair, and pierced with 3 darts, King Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, was killed by Baasa, King Elah by Zimri, Ahaziah by Jehu, Athaliah by Jehoiada, the kings Jehoiakim, Jeconiah, and Zedekiah, were led into captivity. You know how perished Croesus, Astyages, Darius, Dionysius of Syracuse, Pyrrhus, Perseus, Hannibal, Jugurtha, Ariovistus, Caesar, Pompey, Nero, Otho, Vitellius, Domitian, Richard II. Of England, Edward II, Henry VI, Richard III, Mary Stuart, Charles I, the 3 Henrys of France, the Emperor Henry IV. You know. "I know also," said Condeed, "that we must cultivate our garden." "You are right," said Pangloss, "for when man was first placed in the Garden of Eden, he was put there ut operator eum, that he might cultivate it, which shows that man was not born to be idle." "Let us work," said Martin, without disputing. "It is the only way to render life tolerable." The whole little society entered into this laudable design, according to their different abilities. Their little plot of land produced plentiful crops. Cunegonde was, indeed, very ugly, but she became an excellent pastry cook. Paquette worked at embroidery. The old woman looked after the linen. They were all, not excepting Friar Giroflée, of some service or other, for he made a good joiner, and became a very honest man. Pangloss sometimes said to Condeed, "There is a concatenation of events in this best of all possible worlds, for if you had not been kicked out of a magnificent castle for love of Miss Cunegonde, if you had not been put into the Inquisition, if you had not walked over America, if you had not stabbed the Baron, if you had not lost all your sheep from the fine country of El Dorado, you would not be here eating preserved citrons and pistachio nuts." "All that is very well," answered Condeed, "but let us cultivate our garden." Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed Voltaire's Candide, please let us know by hitting the like button, and by subscribing to the Classic Masterworks channel. See you next time.